Hi, I'm Dave Atkinson, and welcome to Life on the Straight. Please take a moment to listen to the song My Caregiver. It is now available on music stores and streaming services including iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Pandora, and many others. I've also placed the music video under my Creative Projects playlist. This is part 5 of the story behind the song.
Radiation and amputation, some things they couldn't fix.
We arrived to the surgical floor between 6 and 6:30 a.m. on August 9th. After an hour or so in the waiting room, I was wheeled through the doors and into the bowels of the hospital. Here I was to learn about pain management, and I had a choice to make. I could rely on drugs post-surgery to help with my pain, or I could have them insert an epidural mesh into my spine. After signing more consent forms, I could be paralyzed after all, I went ahead and gave them permission. It was a very unpleasant experience, mostly due to the posture they wanted me in, which was bent way over to roll my spine outwards, and my extremely sore leg having to deal with said posture. I then laid back on the hospital bed, and they covered me up with a strange kind of blanket I had never seen before. It was made of clear plastic and inflated with hot air. It was a day of OR delays, and they finally rolled me back to the operating room around 2:30 p.m. To recap, they would be performing 3 separate surgeries under one anesthesia. Remove the tumor, insert the carbon fiber rod, reposition the surviving leg muscles. 7 hours later, they released me into the ICU to recover. I can remember coming out of anesthesia after surgery. I had never in my entire life felt pain as intense as what I was feeling. Amy and her brother Jerry were waiting for me in the ICU once they had my pain somewhat under control, but I was not a good patient at the time. Vile stuff was coming out of both ends of me, and Amy was stuck with cleanup duty when the ICU nurse was away. As we were now into the next day, I was under close observation. When the surgeon came in to check on me, he didn't like the fact that my foot was cold. That meant that the surgery probably threw a blood clot into my system, and they would have to act fast. I was back into surgery by 3 p.m., and they found the clot way up in my hip area. The surgery took around 4 hours. Unfortunately, the loss of blood to the leg during all of that time most likely killed the muscle tissue, which does not grow back. During surgery, they had to cut 2 incisions on both sides of my calf as they searched for the clot, and they were left open for the blood to drain. I would need 2 more surgeries to sew them back up. According to notes that Amy took, I was pretty miserable and nauseous for a few days following the surgeries. My throat was raw from being intubated during surgery. My kidney function was heading towards dialysis, but thankfully pulled out of it. I needed several blood transfusions. I still couldn't get myself to eat anything. After spending 5 days in the ICU, they moved me into a normal hospital room with another surgery scheduled in 2 days to sew up one of the calf incisions. This is also the first time in my life that I was hallucinating. Everything in the ICU, the walls, ceilings, furniture, even the paper cup holding the ice chips, had this beautiful light yellow background with an extremely intricate white lace over it. It was very subtle. I told Amy that I couldn't believe that everything had this pattern on it, and that they must have bought everything from the same company. Only when I looked in a cup of water and saw the pattern on the water itself did it hit me that my eyes were deceiving me. Dr. Thompson poked his head into my room a day or so after my blood clot surgery to bring us up to speed on the operations to date, and he had a smile on his face. The tumor had weighed 10 pounds. Now the next time you go grocery shopping, pick up a 10-pound bag of sugar or flour and imagine carrying that around inside of your leg. But what made him smile is that the pathology department looked at the tumor and determined that 95% of the cancer cells had been killed by the immunotherapy and radiation treatments. Normally, it would have been 25 to 30%. Choosing immunotherapy over chemotherapy seemed to be the right choice. Today, the immunotherapy drug pembrolizumab goes by the name Keytruda and is in common use. I feel good that by being part of the clinical trial, I was able to push or help push the cancer treatment ball forward at least by a little bit. Soon after being released from the ICU, a nurse inserted what is called a PICC line, peripherally inserted central catheter, into a vein in my arm. Using ultrasound, they thread a long tube through larger veins until the end of the tube sits in a large central vein near my heart. This allows pain meds and blood, and that's outgoing and ingoing, such as transfusions, to take place without the need of having to poke my arm or insert an IV. Amy worked the little suction balls to keep the blood out of my open leg wounds. She slept on a torturous bed setup that they wheeled in so she could stay with me. She fetched me ice and rounded up a nurse if a bowel movement was on the way. They had inserted a catheter during surgery for urine collection, thank goodness. She brought me my phone and chargers so I could listen to my music all throughout the long nights. With nurses coming in at least on the hour to prick my finger for blood, it was all but impossible to get a good night's sleep. I would watch the second hand of the big wall clock tick away, 1 second at a time. Nights lasted for an eternity. On August 15th, they wheeled me into the operating room for another surgery, this time to seal up one of the open leg wounds and to check if the muscle tissue in my leg was still alive. It's funny because when I came out of anesthesia and the doctor told me that my lower leg muscle tissue was dead, I looked right at him and said, "Remove the entire leg." I was as unemotional as a person could be, but it was simply the only choice that made sense. Because of the dead tissue, they canceled the second surgery to sew up the other calf incision. I could have gone for a below-the-knee amputation, but then what? What kind of foundation would I have for the rest of my life? A brittle, cancer-encircled leg bone. Leg muscles that only partially worked, and in only one direction. And cancer likes to revisit where it had already been. I ask, if you take off my entire leg and then patch me up, will any of the tissue you use have been touched by cancer? The answer was no. In the days before my scheduled amputation, I was still not well. I couldn't get myself to eat anything, and the nurses said that they would soon have to insert a feeding tube down my throat, and I really wouldn't want that. In the meantime, a doctor and his team that dealt with pain management learned about my lack of food intake, and he said he woke up in the middle of the night thinking if a marijuana-derived medication called CBD might help both with pain and with appetite stimulation. Would I care to try it? I had nothing to lose, and later that morning I took my first pills. By the next day, I was hungry. Amy ordered me breakfast, and while it still tasted horrible, I ate it. At first I thought that the hospital just had a lousy kitchen, but it was only after I opened a packet of Heinz ketchup that I knew that the problem was me and not the food. The ketchup didn't taste anything like I remember, like I knew. it should taste like. 2 days later, on August 17th, the surgeons were going to do what is called a hip disarticulation. Shortly before they came and got me in the early evening, I asked Amy to grab one of the markers that was lying on a whiteboard. I used it to write the following message on the big long white bandage that was taped to the top of my leg. Dear leg, thank you for 64 great years. Love, Dave. I briefly thought about writing something profane, but decided to put my positive rather than negative energy into it. One of the songs on my playlist that I had just listened to was Tim McGraw's Please Remember Me. The lyrics really stuck with me. Remember me when you're out walking, when snow falls high outside your door, late at night when you're not sleeping, and moonlight falls across your floor, when I can't hurt you anymore. I was wheeled into surgery around 6:30 p.m., where the prep team once again attached an epidural mesh into my spine. Unfortunately, the first attempt failed, and they had to remove it and begin from scratch. This time, I couldn't sit on the edge of the bed and bend my spine. I couldn't even move my left leg, so I had to do the best that I could while sitting up in bed. They eventually got the darn thing inserted, and about 4 hours later, it was over. My leg was gone for good.